like Santa Claus.
Yeah. Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Joe Holloway, and I want to thank the Friends of the Seymour Library for having me up tonight. This is the largest turnout, and I'm very glad to see so much interest in the old wine. I've done a couple of these sort of presentations over the years and in various different kinds of venues and events, and this is the biggest one, I think, dedicated to just being interested in the railroad. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up in South Knoxville, and my parents lived on Island Home Pike, close to Anderson School, about a mile away from Anderson School, which is where all 6 of us went, my siblings and myself. And so we have South Knoxville deep roots. My mother just left that property after 62 years of living there, so she is living elsewhere now, but it's still home whenever we drive through there. My background is I currently work for the city of Knoxville. I work for Fleet Services, and so we buy the cars and trucks and so forth and maintain them and then sell them when they're done. So that's my current job, but prior to that, I did a 22-year military career, 10 in the U.S. Navy and 12 in the 278th Regiment of the National Guard here in Knoxville. Thank you. So I spent kind of a lot of years away from this area in my career, but I always kept interest kindled in trying to gather facts and information about the Smoky Mountain Railroad. How I actually got interested in it was being a little boy. My dad, he would always want to take a Sunday drive, or in some cases other days of the week. And but on Sunday drives, invariably we went to church at Valley Grove, so we were right here, just miles away. And he would always want to go to the mountains, and we would usually go toward Gatlinburg in that direction. However, unlike millions of other people going up Chapman in those days before exit 407, Dad would cut off on Old Sevierville Pike and go that route. And the reason that he always wanted to go the old road, the nostalgic way, was because his grandmother, my great-grandmother, lived in Boyd's Creek, and she was a Houck. She was of the Houck family. And so when Dad was a boy, back in the 20s and 30s, and young boy and young man, his father, my grandfather, would drive the Old Sevierville Pike because, of course, Chapman Highway didn't exist until about 1936 or 37, somewhere in that neighborhood, in the late 30s. So they'd go Old Sevierville Pike, and the game that my grandfather would play in those old Model A cars and 30 model, whatever Ford they were driving, was every time he would reach the crossing, the level crossing of the railroad, which wasn't really level, it had a little hump to it, as you may remember, some of you, he would want to hit it at high speed. So as to get air, in our current language, he would get some air going over that and throw everybody into the ceiling of the car. Again, Dad did not disappoint. He did the same thing in the 67 Chevy. So on our Sunday drives, we'd be airborne. There were a couple of crossings you could do that on. So my very first exposure to it was a dangerous automotive trick. I also remember, however, as many of you I'm sure do, when you turn left at that time in the late 60s, early 70s, prior to about 1972, you make the left there on Old Sevierville Pike off the highway, and there sat a steam locomotive rusting away. Very likely the business owners in the front, I think it was a gas station there, maybe an Esso, I can't remember. But they were using the boiler as their trash burner, as their furnace for burning garbage. And hey, it worked, up until it got full of ash. But anyway, that was a vivid memory, seeing this oxidized, rusting, beautiful old locomotive sitting by the side of the road. So that was my first exposure. And over the years, the legend of the railroad, of course, Dad would always talk about Old Smoky. Well, he called it Old Smoky, but a lot of people, as you've heard, refer to it as the slow and easy, or or Slowpoke and Easy, or whichever their variation. But he would tell us, and it kind of became a legend with my brothers and me especially, because all three of us boys were railroad fanatics. We loved trains and had electric ones, and so it was only natural that here's this legendary line that we never even saw run, but yet it was still, you could still see signs of it, and we'd go see, and, oh, there's Old Smoky. And it was kind of an attraction even after it was gone. Well, fast forward the clock, and the real reason that I became absolutely infatuated with this railroad is because we were at Green Acres Flea Market one Saturday. And Dad, being who my dad was, he bought coffee table books of all descriptions. He had a huge book collection. So while everybody else is trying to find a mirror for their truck or something in the flea market, Dad's looking at books. And here is this guy, and he's selling really nice books, almost new. And Dad looks down at this table, and here's a book, and it's called Ghost Railroads of Tennessee. Now, Ghost Railroads of Tennessee was printed, I think, actually after the death of its author, who was Elmer Sulzer. Ghost Railroads, at that time, was a hard copy book with a beautiful cover, and you can get it again. There are reprints now. You can order from Amazon or some other website. But this gentleman at Green Acres had two of them. And Dad said, "How much are you asking for this book?" And the guy said, I remember this vividly, he said, "Well, I'll sell you this one for 10. It's about that thick, it's about that big.
Oh, wow.
Beautiful small print with huge black and white photos and some color plates." He said, "I'll sell it to you for $10, or I'll sell you 2 for $15. Well, Dad, being a school teacher and on a somewhat limited income, he said, "Well, I'll take one of them." So he bought one. Now, he wasn't a piker. He just didn't want to spend $15. And so anyway, he buys the one. Well, we later find out, after getting it home and talking to some other people, that that book at that time was selling in New York City for over $500 a copy.
Oh, boy.
But what makes that book so special, and why it's the reason for my obsession, I guess, is because, and this is not obviously the original book, but this is a really good copy, because #1 chapter is the route of Old Smoky. And it's got about 20, 25 pages of information here, and beautiful pictures. So this was the very first time, other than looking at number 110 locomotive sitting down here, that you could actually see in a printed document that I knew of anyway, the legend of the Smoky Mountain Railroad. So anyway, so that's how it came about. So at that point I started researching, and there it is. And you leave it to the library to have it. This is the reprint. The original had a full cover with Little River Railroad locomotive from Townsend or Elkmont. This is the reprint, exactly the same book, and it's an awesome. There's several of them. Ghost Railroads of Tennessee, of Georgia, I think, Florida. There's various editions, but this is probably the most famous one of Sulzer's books in terms of historic railroad books. Thank you for reading that. So at that point, I was hooked, because here was the basis for interest and knowledge about this old railroad. Now, the railroad disappeared literally from the face of the earth when I was 1 year old. My older brother, Jim, my oldest brother, remembers vaguely the diesel engine, which was in operation for probably about 8 years, 7 or 8 years, when he was a young boy. But I don't have any memories because it was gone before I came along. I was born in '65. Rails were ripped up in '66. It did cease operation, as was mentioned earlier, in January 1961. So anyone that was of age in those days could probably remember it at that point. To tell you just a little bit about the railroad itself, the railroad, believe it or not, and we have a website about the railroad, which I'll show you later, and we'll let you know the address for it and so forth. The railroad was actually result of several different visions by several different people in history. That the earliest known desire to put a railroad through this general vicinity, basically crossing the Appalachian Mountains, the earliest thought of that was from a United States senator named Payne, who came from South Carolina. Many of you who know railroads might realize that Payne Yard is named for him. But he was a senator in about 1830-ish, and it was his vision to build a railroad from Charleston to what was then western United States, up towards Chicago, or the west of the Alleghenies, basically put a railroad. Part of that vision in a drawing was the railroad that later came through here. So as early as about 1836, Senator Hayne saw that as a possibility. He was a visionary. And there's much more to say about him and his plans, but that'll be a different session, because that's a totally different time and group of people. But ultimately, over about 60 more years, several different people proposed the idea of building a railroad basically through this general vicinity and actually assaulting the Smoky Mountains with it, going over the Smokies in whatever engineering method they could do. The reason that this railroad was routed where it is, through Shook's Gap and basically along following the lay of the land, the Shook's Gap cut that we know today, the Chapman Highway and the county line, was put there because of the railroad plans. The very first railroad that was planned to come through here failed in terms of financially, but they had already done the cut. So when the founder of the later Slow and Easy was looking for routes, he said, hey, there's a cut already through the Bays Mountain. So there was no necessity to continue an engineering that had already occurred. And so he routed that railroad through your neck of the woods. That individual that was what we would call the father of the railroad through Sevier County, or into Sevier County, was William J. Oliver. I apologize because I don't have a large photo like this one scanned yet. I need to scan this one. But William J. Oliver was an industrialist who had several companies over the years. If anybody knows where Roman Haas, or I guess it's DuPont now, if you know where Roman Haas is in downtown Knoxville, that used to be called the William J. Oliver Manufacturing Company. Now this fella came from Indiana, and his achievements over the years were many. He was very controversial, but some of the things that he accomplished were, he built the railroad that runs what is called the New Line, that runs from Etowah, Tennessee, down towards Cartersville, Georgia. What the L&N is now CSX. That was his line. It replaced, or I should say, it supplanted the Hook and Eye Division Railroad, which ran across through the Hiwassee Loop and Copper Hill to Etowah, or I should say to Reliance. That was his railroad, though, going due south from Etowah to Cartersville, Georgia. It's still very much in operation and very important rail. He also built things like the Clinch Avenue Viaduct. So if you go to the Clinch Avenue Viaduct on the World's Fair Park, you're like, wow, what a bridge. That's his bridge. He also won the contract for the Panama Canal construction. Before it was turned over to the United States Army Corps of Engineers, it was his job. And at some point, I think it was President Roosevelt, I need to study my history on this, but I believe that Roosevelt decided it would be a better task for a unit like the Army Corps of Engineers to do because of the conditions down in Panama. Because a bunch of hillbillies from his company going down there probably would have been dead with malaria and whatever. So he, however, did build the rail cars which went and moved earth and moved rock and so forth when they dug the ditch. So he still made a huge contribution to the construction of the Panama Canal. One other thing about Mr. Oliver, he was best friends, good friends with Teddy Roosevelt. Mr. Oliver lived in a house that is right next to where Neelan Drive intersects Kingston Pike. Teddy Roosevelt stayed there many times because he was a bull moose political party member, and a big one. So if y'all want to pass that around, that's William J. Oliver. Sadly, he got hit by a truck at age 57, thereabouts. And I think actually he got hit when he was about 52 and he died when he was 57. He died a very young man. And he never did recover from the injuries being hit by that vehicle on Kingston Pike. Okay, so we got William J. Oliver, multimillionaire industrialist, built the Appalachian Exposition in 1910. Many of you may have seen the exhibit up at downtown Knoxville on that. William J. Oliver wanted to build a railroad connecting this part of the world with the eastern seaboard. So he actually designed, or had his engineers design, what is now known the route of the slow and easy coming through this area. But the intent was never for it to be its own system. The intent was for him to sell this railroad to one of the established bigger lines and make it a part of, say, the Southern, and especially the Southern. It's our understanding that the president at the time of the Southern Railway was a Mr. Spencer, also known for the Spencer Yards over in North Carolina, Spencer Shops. Henry, I believe, was his first name. Him and Oliver were friends. They used to go hunting together. They would go, I guess they just knew each other being in such big business. There was a gentleman's agreement that once Oliver accomplished the construction of the railroad from Knoxville to Sevierville, that portion, that the Southern was going to buy the railroad as part of its system, and then further send the railroad perhaps either through Newport, that way, connect with the Southern over there, or even more progressively and impressively, send it over the mountains with an incredible feat of engineering that would have been. We think the Clinch Field up in northeast Tennessee was an incredible engineering marvel, and it is. This would have been incredible to cross the main range of the Smoky Mountains. So that was his plan initially. Sadly, while in the process of building this line, this slow and easy line, Mr. Spencer was killed in a train wreck, president of the Southern. So the gentleman's agreement died at Lawyers, Virginia, around 1907 or 08, whenever that accident occurred. And therefore, Mr. Oliver was left with a railroad that he had to do something with. And so he proceeded, he went ahead and finished the railroad, and it was built essentially from both directions at once. They came together. It wasn't a golden spike type thing, but there was already work done up here at this end at the Shook's Gap, so they worked at this end, but they also worked from Vestal coming out this way to connect with the Southern Railway in Vestal.